The mine had collapsed. Dust and silence filled the mountain air. Everyone feared the worst, until a canine dog refused to stop barking at the rubble. At first they thought he sensed trapped men, but with every claw at the stone, every frantic bark, he seemed to be pointing to something far deeper. Minutes turned to hours, the dog growing more desperate, until finally a hidden passage was uncovered, one that no miner even knew existed. But here's the question. If the dog hadn't barked that day, what secret would have remained buried forever? Here's the full story. But before we jump in, drop the name of your favorite dog in the comments and make sure you hit that subscribe button. The mountainside lay in eerie silence after the collapse, the ground still trembling faintly as dust clouds hung heavy in the air. The mine entrance, once a steady passage carved through years of labor, was now a twisted heap of rock, earth, and shattered timber. The miners who had just returned to the surface stood frozen, staring at the wreckage that had sealed off the lower shaft. They knew men had been down there only minutes before. Emergency crews had begun to gather, their radios alive with clipped voices. Some spoke of another tremor coming, others of a pocket of air that might still exist beneath the debris. No one knew for certain. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavier than the stone itself. Then, from the line of rescue vehicles parked on the dirt road, a sharp bark split the chaos. Heads turned as a German shepherd lunged forward against his leash, pulling his handler straight toward the collapsed mine. His fur bristled, his movements urgent, his throat releasing a deep growl that cut through the nervous chatter. The handler, Officer Hale, tightened his grip but allowed the dog to lead. "Something's wrong," one of the miners muttered, watching as the dog stopped just feet from the pile of rock, barking furiously, nose pressed low to the ground as if he smelled something no human could. The crowd edged closer, their faces pale and tense. At first the men thought the K9 was reacting to trapped survivors, but the dog's behavior was different. He wasn't pointing toward a single spot. He circled, scratched, and barked as though he sensed more than just human life. It was as if the mine itself was hiding a secret. Speculation began to ripple through the group. Was it gas leaking from underground? Was the dog warning of another collapse? Or could he be picking up on survivors deeper than anyone believed possible? Each question only added to the thick tension hanging in the mountain air. The miners, men who had spent decades underground and trusted their instincts more than any equipment, exchanged uneasy glances. Something about the dog's relentless urgency unsettled them. One of the older miners stepped forward, his voice low. "That dog knows something. He ain't barking at ghosts. We better listen." Within moments, tools were gathered, spotlights were aimed, and men scrambled to dig. The dog never wavered, his paws clawed at the rubble, his body straining forward as though every second mattered. His ears twitched, his chest heaved, and his bark echoed across the valley like a warning no one could ignore. The mine had been through collapses before, but this one felt different. Every swing of a pick, every lifted stone seemed to reveal not only the danger of unstable rock, but also the possibility that something more lay beneath. The first layers of rubble gave way slowly. Every chunk of broken stone lifted revealed only more dust, shattered beams, and twisted metal rails. The men worked in silence, save for the harsh scrape of tools and the steady bark of the K9, who seemed more desperate with each passing minute. His paws beat against the ground, his claws striking sparks on exposed stone. Officer Hale could feel the dog's tension rippling through the leash. "Easy, boy," he whispered under his breath. But the animal wasn't calming. Instead, his growl deepened, his ears flicked toward the darkness beyond the collapsed shaft, and his nose pressed harder to the earth as though the truth lay just inches away. By now, every miner had abandoned doubt. They worked like men possessed, driven by the dog's urgency. The fear of another cave-in lingered with every crack of shifting rock overhead, yet none dared stop. Something beyond survival instinct pushed them forward, something about the way the dog refused to relent. Half an hour passed. A hollow thud echoed when a pick struck deeper stone, different from the rest. The sound carried strangely, resonating like it had struck against a cavity rather than solid ground. Heads jerked upward, eyes met, and silence fell. The canine barked sharply, paws digging at the exact spot where the hollow noise had rung out. It was no longer a matter of chance the dog had led them here. "Keep going," one of the miners barked and the others obeyed, tearing at the rubble faster now. The sound grew clearer with each strike, hollow, echoing as though something hidden was waiting to be uncovered. Then, in the dim glow of their lights, a glint appeared beneath the dust. Not metal rails, not a tool, not anything they had seen in a mine before. The shard was smooth, curved, and faintly reflective under the beam. A murmur spread through the crew. "What is that?" a miner whispered, his voice nearly trembling. Before anyone could guess, the dog lunged forward again, barking furiously at the exposed surface, his teeth snapping toward the stone. It wasn't random. He wanted them to uncover it. More rubble was cleared until a section of what looked like a sealed arch revealed itself. Unlike the jagged rock around it, this arch was smooth, carved, deliberate. It didn't belong to the mine. It belonged to something far older. The miners exchanged uneasy glances. The shaft had been mapped 100 times. No one had ever reported a structure like this buried beneath. Could be an old tunnel, maybe even another mine, one suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. The canine growled low, pressing close to the arch, sniffing furiously. He whined once, a sharp, high-pitched sound that carried desperation. That sound unsettled everyone. Dogs bark at threats. They growl at danger. But this whine, it was different. It was as if the dog was pleading. The arch stood firm under their lamps, and the hollow echo beneath their feet told them more was hidden below. And for the first time, the miners weren't just digging for men. They were digging for answers. The arch was unlike anything the men had ever seen. Dust clung to its surface, yet beneath the grime, the stone shimmered faintly as though it had been carved and sealed long before the mine even existed. The silence among the workers grew heavier, broken only by the steady panting and sharp barks of the canine. Officer Hale kept his hand on the dog's harness. He could feel the tremors coursing through the animal's body, not of fear but of sheer urgency. The dog's nose pressed hard against the cracks in the stone, as though he knew exactly what was on the other side. "Clear it," one miner said firmly. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed unease. Picks and crowbars slammed into the edges, each strike ringing with that same hollow note. Dust poured down, rocks tumbled loose, and slowly the outline of a sealed passage came into view. The dog barked frantically, pulling against Hale's grip so hard the officer nearly lost control. Then came the moment none of them expected. A final swing cracked the stone face and a section caved inward, releasing a rush of stale, cold air that smelled of earth, rust, and something else. Something sharp, metallic, almost unnatural. The dog howled, not in fear but in triumph. Their headlamps pierced the void, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into the darkness below. Wooden supports framed its sides, rotted and brittle, but still intact enough to suggest deliberate construction. This was no accident. Someone had built this, then hidden it. Whispers rippled among the men. Another mine? Smuggler's tunnel? Something older? No one had answers, but the canine seemed to. He lunged forward the moment the gap was wide enough, straining toward the tunnel mouth, barking as though time was running out. Hale knelt low, his hand brushing over the ground, and froze. He felt something smooth, fabric, a torn piece of cloth buried in the dust. He pulled it free, revealing the edge of a miner's jacket. The men crowded around. One miner recognized the patch sewn onto the sleeve. "That's Rourke's," he whispered, his throat tightening. Rourke had been one of the men unaccounted for when the collapse struck. The discovery injected new energy into the crew. Shovels bit deeper, hands clawed at the rubble, and soon the opening was wide enough for one man to crawl through. But before anyone could volunteer, the canine shoved forward again, his bark echoing like an urgent command. The decision was made. Hale clipped on a line, strapped a lamp to his chest, and followed the dog inside. The air grew colder as they descended, the walls narrowing, the silence pressing in. Every step echoed with unease, each sound amplified by the hollow stone. The dog suddenly stopped, ears perked, nose twitching. He gave a sharp bark, then pressed his paw against the ground. And from the darkness ahead came the faintest sound, so faint that at first they thought it was the tunnel itself groaning. But it wasn't. It was knocking. The knocking grew louder the deeper they went, rhythmic and desperate, bouncing through the narrow tunnel walls. Each strike carried the weight of someone still alive, someone fighting to be heard. The miners behind Hale froze, their breaths sharp, their lamps casting nervous shadows across the stone. The K9 lunged forward again, ears locked, tail rigid, barking in frantic bursts that echoed off the walls. He pulled Hale toward a bend in the tunnel where the air felt heavier, tinged with damp earth and rust. The dog's nose pressed to the ground, then lifted sharply. He had locked onto something living. "Dig here," a voice shouted from behind. Tools were shoved forward, and the men attacked the wall of stone with a ferocity born of hope. The dog pawed at the rubble alongside them, his nails scraping at the cracks until blood streaked his pads. He didn't stop, not for a second. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the wall gave way. Rocks tumbled outward, and a small cavity appeared, large enough for a faint beam of light to shine through. Dust poured from the gap, but with it came the unmistakable sound of voices. Weak, muffled, but real. The miners roared with urgency, prying the opening wider until the cavity revealed itself to be a pocket of air sealed off when the mine collapsed. Inside, huddled in the choking dark, were 3 men. Rourke and 2 others, faces pale, clothes torn but alive. The K9 let out a single deep bark, then sat down, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the survivors as though to say his work was done. The men inside were pulled out one by one, their bodies weak but spirits surging with relief. Tears streaked across the faces of their fellow miners as they embraced them, disbelief mixing with joy. Against all odds, they had survived, and it was the dog who had known exactly where to lead them. As the rescued men were carried toward the surface, Hale glanced back at the tunnel. His light swept over the carved archway, its stone edges too precise, too deliberate to ignore. Questions still lingered. What was this hidden passage? Why had it been buried? And what secrets lay deeper inside? But in that moment, answers didn't matter. Lives had been saved, and that was the mystery worth solving. When they emerged from the darkness into the blinding daylight, the valley erupted in cheers. Families rushed forward, voices breaking as they clutched the survivors. Rourke, barely able to stand, lifted a trembling hand and pointed to the K9. "Him," he rasped. He never gave up, and though the carved passage would raise questions for years to come, one truth would remain unshaken on that day, when hope was nearly gone. It was the dog's relentless bark that turned silence into survival. The mystery had been solved. The miners were alive, and the K9 walked out of the dust a hero. And that's how a single bark saved lives and uncovered a hidden secret no one saw coming. Stories like this prove that one moment can change everything. Don't miss the next one. Hit subscribe, tap like, and be here when the next mystery unfolds.